Wave if you can't hear me. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm Mark Fiorentino, the first selectman. I'm grateful for all of the boards being here and taking some time tonight. And grateful for all of our citizens who could make it to see the presentation. I want to start with just a very brief kind of high level, what are we doing here? What's the process? Let's get everybody on the same page, coordinate what we're thinking about doing here. So Broadleaf is here tonight to show us about their project. They're proposing.
Sir, you can keep the microphone. Just a little faint back here.
I'm told if I use the microphone, it would create feedback and that'd be worse. All right. That's better?
Much better.
Okay. So you're going to hear from a company named Broadleaf. That's not the full name of the company, but they're going to tell you the whole thing tonight. They are proposing a fairly large solar generation project on the former Monrovia project. It's a generation facility that is designed to put power out onto the grid, not necessarily to serve Granby. They're going to tell you the details about that. What's important to understand is how this process works under state law. Under Connecticut law, the town of Granby is going to have no direct jurisdiction over this project. And because of its size and its nature, the jurisdiction for this project lies with the Connecticut Siting Council. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that process. Our town will be a party, at least that's the intent, a party to those proceedings in front of the Siting Council. So we will have an opportunity through those proceedings to present our thoughts, our concerns, and provide input. But again, to be clear, we won't make the decision. We'll be part of a group that will be making input to the Siting Council as they make decisions. I always get this number wrong. Is it 60 or 90 days ahead of when you file it to give it to us?
60.
All right. So under the Connecticut statute, they're required to give us, the town, their application to the Siting Council 60 days before they file it with the Siting Council. Broadleaf is working to actually be ahead of that. There's nothing that requires them to be here tonight. If they just followed the statute precisely, they would give us an application. We'd have 60 days to figure out what to do with it, give them any comments, and then they would file it. They're actually looking for us to provide some input to help them educate them on our concerns and our issues before they file the application. So that's why we're here tonight, is to start that process. I will say this, so far, Aaron and his team have been very cooperative. They've been very open to town, very willing to work with us, listen to questions, listen to concerns, get answers. We have a long way to go, but they've been very good so far, and tonight's, their willingness to be here tonight is evidence of that. So this is the very first step in a process we're trying to design a little bit as we go along to make sure we're getting them the information they need, we're getting feedback from them, in a process that will ultimately play itself out in front of the Siting Council. Can't read my own writing. So here's what we're intending to do tonight. Just very generally, a very high level overview of the project. They're going to answer some preliminary questions of the boards tonight. So if the boards take notes during the presentation, if you have questions, they're going to try to answer those tonight. If they can't answer them tonight, we'll follow up on them. We're not going to take public comment tonight, and here's the reason why. They're going to do a separate public session for the public where you can come and you can, they're going to do work sessions and kind of an open house where you can go and get much closer to the project. So the first two input points will be with the boards and then with the public in a separate session. If you didn't see it already though, on our agenda tonight, get it from the website. There is, they have a website set up. So if you want more information before they do the public session, go to the website. I think when I was on it, there's a place where you can email questions, right? So you can communicate directly to them prior to the public session through the website. After we get through the presentation tonight and the board have any questions, we're going to go to some proposed next steps. We haven't really talked in detail with these guys about it yet, so we're going to do that last before we adjourn tonight, what the next steps are from here. Any questions of me before I turn it over to Aaron? All right. I'm just going to disturb you here. Can I do that? Probably sends the police cruiser over.
All right, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I'll try to keep this volume. Thank you for coming out tonight to listen to me talk about our proposed project. It's been great so far working with the town. As Mark said, there's a website set up. If we can't answer questions you have tonight, we're happy to follow up and answer them as we proceed. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the company I work for, and I'll tell you about our proposed project here. And then I'd love to get to questions as soon as possible. Nobody wants to hear me talk for an hour, so we'll try to get there as quickly as we can. So John, Maria, and I work for a company called D.E. Shaw Renewable Investments, or DESRI. DESRI is what's called an IPP, an independent power producer. In New England, the utilities like Eversource don't own the means of production of energy. IPPs do. DESRI is one of the larger energy IPPs across the country. We've got projects from Hawaii to Maine. But the core of my area and the vast majority of my experience over the last 17 years has been developing solar projects here in New England, Connecticut, as well as Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and we skipped over Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We did build the Simsbury project, which is down the road. I think folks might be familiar with that. We're also currently building a project in East Windsor called Gravel Pit Solar, which is the largest solar project in New England under construction. So this just shows you a little bit about where we are. We do own wind as well as solar and some energy storage, and that's it. We are only a renewable energy company. We are also a company that owns these assets for their life of for the life of the asset. So we do not develop these and then flip them. We're not in it to make money that way. We're in it to own the asset and be part of the community long term. So I'll get to the project now. You all have lived in this town for a long time, and I'm sure are very familiar with the Monrovia property. Monrovia came to us a number of years ago and indicated that they were going to ramp down operations on this property. They no longer were going to be using this as a nursery long term. I'm not sure about all the economics from their side, but as I understand it, the majority of their business is in California. They have operations to the southeast, and this particular property was no longer going to be used as a nursery. So we worked with them to negotiate a strategy so that they could ramp down operations and not just, pull the plug, ramp down operations and transition off of the property. Our plan is to develop essentially the area where there are greenhouses or hoop houses as a solar farm. I'm sure you all know the property better than I do, or just as well. Currently, I think you'll notice that there's not grass growing on the property now. Our first step in this process is to plant grass, right? And we'll actually be doing some of that in discrete areas this spring. As owners of the property, we're looking to restore the environmental integrity of the property and transition it into a solar farm long term. This is just another view. So, just have a pointer. There we go. Okay, that's the north side of the property. You can see here, this is Floydville Road going through the middle. And this is what it looks like now. These are the hoop houses. And they're actually set up in a similar manner to how we would set up a solar farm. These would be north-south linear rows of solar panels. And we would put them essentially in the same areas where there's hoop houses now. This is a preliminary layout. It's orientated a little bit differently than the last image. This is north, this is south. Same concept. Essentially the areas where the hoop houses are would be turned into solar panels. Again, as Mark indicated, we are very early in this process. We want to come to you all. We want to get your input on our preliminary design. We want to answer questions you might have about solar farms in general, this potential solar farm, how we're going to integrate with the community, and get your feedback before we start a formal regulatory process. Following tonight's Q&A, there'll be plenty of other opportunities to ask questions and follow up with the team. So just a brief set of facts on project benefits. So we will create a new stable tax revenue stream for the community, significantly higher than what Monrovia produces now off the property. And I'll be honest, there's not a lot of jobs associated with these types of projects, unfortunately. It's one of the downsides of solar. We're about 150 jobs during construction. And then during operation, it's a handful of jobs for maintenance. We may have sheep out there to manage vegetation, but this is unfortunately not a major job creator for the community. It is a major tax creator for the community. There's also sort of the unspoken benefits of renewable energy. So this is clean, cost-effective energy putting on the grid. This energy will go to the Eversource system and will help stabilize prices in Connecticut and the region as a whole. So hopefully, I can't make promises, but hopefully, the more solar on the grid, the less often Eversource is going to raise rates, at least in concept. So where are we at? There's a number of different things required to build a solar project. First and foremost, we need land control. As I mentioned, we own the land here in Granby and East Granby. We also need an interconnection agreement with a group called the Independent System Operator of New England, ISO New England. We started the process of getting an interconnection agreement with them about a year and a half ago. It's a process that takes a very long time. So we started that early. We also need a permit from the Siting Council, and we want very much support from the community for our projects. And we also need a power purchase agreement. So that is an agreement with a counterparty that's going to purchase the power from our project, and we have that in hand as well. So we're here coming to you with a number of the elements required for a project, a number of the commercial elements, but still a lot to be done in terms of the design, making sure the project fits your community, and getting some feedback from you all in that process. So as part of that, we do a lot of environmental studies. Some of these are ongoing now. So wetland delineations, we do a lot of environmental contaminant assessments. Folks may be aware, but a large portion of this property is covered under what's called the Transfer Act. So it is a contaminated parcel from past uses. We're monitoring that. We've remediated a lot of that, but we'll continue to monitor that for the life of the project and as long as we own the property. We also do intensive wildlife studies. We've met with the Department of Environmental Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP. We'll be out there doing turtle studies. What else, John? Frogs?
Vernal pools, yeah, we have a number, they provide a list of species that may occur on site. So we're focused on those, but also looking at other species that may not be listed, but could be present on site. So.
Thank you. Geotech, soil studies, cultural assessments. So this is both prehistoric and historic artifacts. We look into all of that. Visual impact. This is typically one of the bigger concerns from communities. What is this going to look like? How are you going to screen this thing so that I don't have to see it on my drive to work or when I go by? That's a big part of what we do. As well as topography, glare analysis, and some sound analysis. This has also become an issue in certain areas, especially with smaller solar projects being sited too close to homes. There can be sound impacts from some of the equipment. We make sure we study that. We're held to a very high bar when it comes to sound analyses, and we're required to cite the noise-making components of the facility very far away from anybody's home. Just as an example of some of the things that we'll be doing as we proceed, if folks can see this, I know it's kind of small, but this is the current view looking roughly south from Floydville into the existing Monrovia nursery. And this is the view of the proposed solar project. This is a rendering, a computer rendering of what the solar project would look like, as well as some of the visual mitigation, so some of the tree plantings that we have here. So just to give folks a sense of what it might look like, and we'll do a number of these types of renderings as we proceed. If you live nearby and you're interested in what it would look like from your house, we're happy to do a rendering from your house. We're also happy to talk about individual screening opportunities with vegetation for specific homes. Nobody's going to be able to see this, so I'll just skip over it. This is our general overview of the timeline here. Maria, I'm sorry, I can't even see it. But the plan is to submit a permit application later this year, likely this summer. Before that, we'll have at least one open house in the community here. We'll be delivering a draft application to Granby, as well as to East Granby, and there'll be an additional opportunity for the community to provide input there, and then also at a formal Connecticut Siting Council open house that'll occur during the permitting process. And then we would not start construction before late 2025. It's likely to start in 2026 and would be wrapped up by the end of 27 at the latest. That timeline could shift a little bit depending on what happens with permitting, as well as weather conditions, but I just want to give you a sense that we're here years before this is going to be a reality to get your input before we start designing in earnest here. So let me pause there. John, Maria, anything I forgot to mention at the top?
Just one thing. So Aaron indicated south-facing panels. Right now we have two different types of racking that the panels will be set on. One would be tracking, so it'll be more tracking the sun east to west. And then we also have a fixed, which will be facing south. So just highlighting that we'll have two different technologies as we plan right now.
Thanks. So Mark, if it's okay with you, I'll pause there, and if the boards have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yes, hang on, Dave. So I probably should have said this, and you jump in, because we haven't talked specifically about
Sure,
this.
no, please.
So ultimately, the way I'm currently envisioning this process is, I figure our job working with these guys is to minimize the impacts of the projects on the community while at the same time maximizing benefits to the community. And we've had some very preliminary discussions about how to do that and how to work together. So we're kind of thinking of a process in which the Board of Selectmen and our team at Town Hall will sort of be the liaison and the collector of comments and questions and the distributor of information. So we'll be the lead in representing your positions and your questions as we go through this process. So we kind of talked about that, right? So what I was trying to hope to accomplish tonight is to get everybody, especially on the boards, your preliminary questions out of the way, right? Especially if you have questions related to things you would like to know more about, more information about the project, so we can develop that list pretty quickly. And then I think we were envisioning, once we have that list, while Aaron is working with the public and doing that, we're utilizing your time at the same time you're developing anything you want us to know. So this is important to you, ask for this, don't ask for that, and getting it back to us. So that's generally the process we talked about. You're still good with that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So one other thing that I wanted to ask you, if you'd be willing to do this, coming only for me, is besides doing a general workshop with the public, if you would do a separate, much smaller meeting with the abutters. There are a couple of key abutters that I think it'd be more productive if you took them offline and focused on the things that are most important to abutters and not the larger community.
Mark, you raise a really good point. So one of the things I forgot to mention, we do this at all of our projects. We will contact all of the abutters, and I don't mean just people whose property literally abuts, but we're not going to count somebody out just because they're across the street. We're going to contact all of them individually. My goal is to try to have a representative from our team meet with all of them individually over time, as you know, as we can set up those meetings or at least on the phone. And we're starting that outreach as soon as we're done here, basically this week. We'll start talking to all those abutters. They'll get mailings from us, but they'll also be contacted on the phone. If they don't get back to us, we will have somebody knock on their door and leave a flyer. So that's really important to us, is to make sure nobody is, you know, kept in the dark. Everybody, especially abutters, get an opportunity to ask us questions. And as I mentioned earlier, we've done this. I did this in Simsbury. We've done this in East Windsor. Actually, I had a call from an abutter today in East Windsor saying, "Hey, this berm doesn't look quite right, and we have to change it right there in real time, so that we can make sure folks are taken care of. They're getting the visual mitigation, the plantings, the landscaping that they want to block their view from the project."
Okay. So, boards, are you okay with that kind of general process tonight? Let's get your main questions out of the way, especially as they pertain to information that you think you might need really in the next 60 days to develop any comments and questions that you would get back to probably Abby, be the person who's going to organize it all. Is everybody okay with proceeding that way? Well, we can just, let's just start on that end, Rob. You got any questions?
Not at the moment.
All right, we'll start working our way down the table.
Kara Marshall, I'm on the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
I'd love to know more about the kind of soil regeneration you're thinking and what that life cycle looks like.
Excellent. No, it's a good question. I'm going to ask John to answer that because he's a recovering soil scientist and wetland scientist. So.
Yeah, so our plan right now, and as Aaron alluded to, because the soil has been, I think the topsoil was used as part of the earlier stages of nursery, which started in the 1980s, just to give a little history there, is see what works first. So we're doing kind of a trial analysis with different products, so natural things like enzymes, fertilizers that are used to help kind of get grass growing. So we want to try and see maybe 8 different types of seed mixes in different kind of mediums that will help jumpstart the grass to grow. So once we kind of refine on what's working best for the soil type, and actually back up a little bit, we got soil samples, 350 of them, already sent to Cornell for analysis so we can understand what's living and what's missing in the soil. So we are working towards understanding what's out there so we can pick what works. So to your point, soil regeneration starts with getting plant life there, which will bring insects, bacteria, good bacteria, all those things. So it really would be over time. And I think that's one thing people just need to keep in mind with the project to get grass growing. And I think over time you'll see a lot more biodiversity and soil health generating throughout the project.
Thanks, John. And maybe to just recap that, there is no topsoil on this property. It is all mineral soil. It's all sandy stuff. And it doesn't grow well. The weeds kind of grow in some areas, but that's about it. Monrovia currently, and you know, this is how they manage their nursery. They grade it and compact it daily to keep it so they can travel on it. But it is not currently in a condition where you could grow much. So we'll be trying different things to, you know, figure out what works best to restore that topsoil over time. We do this in different ways at all of our projects. Simsbury, for example, we developed a specific seed mix just for that property. There was some soil compaction there. So it has small radishes, it has different legumes to help restore some of that soil. Both of these properties historically were used for tobacco farming, which is notoriously tough on soils.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Kent McCord, Conservation Commission. So we show the sheep, I guess?
Those are sheep. Yeah.
What is your plan for vegetation management once you do get the grass growing? And what do you plan to or will you commit to in that respect? And how does that work for the Siting Council and your whole plan?
Yeah. So let me answer the last part of that first with the Siting Council. We have to provide them with a vegetation management plan, a long-term plan. Our base case at all of our projects is mechanical mowing, as little as possible, usually twice a year. We pick the vegetation partially to make sure it's not something that's going to grow up super high. We don't use herbicides, pesticides. This is mechanical maintenance. We have been talking to a regional sheep farmer, an in-state sheep farmer, and we may be able to use them on this project. I think it would be interesting. We do that elsewhere. This is one of our projects in Minnesota called North Star. So we would like to do that here if we can as an option. Sheep farming is, an emerging industry in Connecticut.
So let's pause there. That's a good example of what I'm talking about. So if that is of particular interest to you and your commission, things you want them to consider in the vegetation management plan, those are the kind of things we're looking from each board, from your particular expertise, that you want us to have in the package as we sit down and work with them over an overall deal, if you will. Does that make sense? Dave?
It's Dave Roberts, Chair of the Conservation Commission. We kind of jumped into this tonight, and I had never heard of the SITING Council till tonight. And it sounds like some amorphous government agency, and I didn't realize that Granby doesn't get a say in this. I don't even know who appoints the Siting Council, how it operates, so I think it'd be helpful for the community, just from a bigger picture, to understand this, so that people realize that there's an outside government agency that controls land use jurisdiction for specific types of development in a community. Because did other people know about this government? I've never heard of it. Yeah, no, okay, so I never heard of it.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Dave. So I'm clear, you're curious about what the Siting Council is, how they operate,
right,
and the jurisdiction.
Specifically, I'd like to understand, I heard our first selectman say that we can give input, but I don't even know who the people are on the council, or are they appointed by the governor, by the legislature, are they elected? Who are, how many? I tried to look them up and it doesn't even tell you who they are.
So before Aaron answers, that's part of the reason we're trying to utilize this process.
Right.
Yeah.
So we will be a party in the proceedings, we being the town of Granby. Our wisdom is to be an effective advocate, both informally with them and during the process. We need to have a single voice, right? So if you're calling Siting Commission or you're filing reports to the Siting Council, you're not doing us any good. Granby needs to speak as one voice. Yep. Which, again, frankly, they have no obligation to commit to, but they're willing to work with us on that, and I think that shows good faith that they're willing to do that. So.
And so I think what I'm trying to express is I think there's a lot of already misinformation in our community. A lot of people think that the five of them are making this decision, and that.
Welcome to our world, Jay.
That's not how it is. And so I just think that getting that type of information out to the community is good. Specifically from our commission perspective, I'm interested more in the stormwater runoff and stuff. A lot of times with solar projects, since I had lived in California, that was a big issue, that trying to control the water runoff and contamination from that, particularly with what's currently on that site. So we would be, I think, interested in that. In the future, not necessarily today, but in the future, if you could just help us understand that it ties into the vegetation issue, which may be over
100%. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. So let me just talk about stormwater for a minute because I didn't go into detail about this. In addition to the siting council certificate, we need to get a stormwater permit from DEEP. And I'll give you a little bit of our history with stormwater in Connecticut. We built one of the largest at the time and one of the first utility scale projects in eastern Connecticut, 20 megawatts. We had a contractor that worked on that site who did the bare minimum with stormwater. And candidly, it did not go well. And it was a bad situation for us and for that contractor. So when it came time to do our second project, which happened to be the one in Simsbury, we swung the pendulum the opposite direction. We did everything DEEP asked us to do and more, and actually helped them in a lot of ways write the current regulations for stormwater at solar projects. So if you go to Simsbury, there are, very minimal issues long-term with stormwater there. It is well protected and is a very over-designed site. I mean, it's designed the way you would design stormwater for a Walmart parking lot, for example. It's very intensive. Similarly, with our East Windsor site, we did a lot of work with DEEP, with their stormwater team, to design that facility in a way that utilizes both natural topography as well as design elements to make sure that there's no issues. We get crazy rain events now, right? As you've seen this winter, we've got to make sure that we don't have issues. Not to knock Monrovia, but if you were to go to that site today, there's a lot of rill erosion. There's a lot of issues with stormwater on that site. And it's predominantly because there's just not vegetation there. So vegetating is the first step, but also putting in stormwater controls, basins, swales, and all the other features that come along with it is important to us. We'll do a lot of monitoring during construction as well as post-construction. And I will say the state is probably, Connecticut's one of the leaders when it comes to stormwater with solar. They require a very hefty bond for us when we get our stormwater permit, and they're very slow to release that until you are fully complied. So not only is it our mission to make sure we don't have those issues, it is very much the state's mission. To answer your question about the siting council, as I stated earlier, I've developed projects all across New England. This is a little bit of a unique structure. Vermont actually has a similar structure. And, I don't know where it came from in Connecticut. I think originally, maybe for some of the larger energy generation projects, frankly, we're held to a standard that, a natural gas plant would be held to, or even a nuclear plant would be held to. That's the standard that we have to meet with the siting council. But it is different, and it's very different for communities that have, are used to home rule, are used to being able to say what's happening in their backyard. And that's really a big part of the reason why we're here. Like, I want to make sure that we go through a lot of the same steps that we would if we were to get approval from the Board of Selectmen, but in a informal way, and then incorporate that into our final, so that the siting council is getting something that you've looked at, kicked around, given us input on, and not just something we put in front of you and say, hey, give us some comments. You got 60 days. John, do you know how they're appointed? I don't recall off the top of my head.
So it's not elected officials. There might be one or two, so apologies. But most of them, like one of them's one represents kind of more of the utility side. So he used to work for Eversource. So they have kind of, let's call them
Subject matter experts. Like there's one guy from DEEP.
Yeah.
So it's those types of folks that are on it. It's not, I don't know if you could get appointed or not, but it's not just average citizens. It's a little bit of a more credentialed approach.
And I just wanted to mention it, when this council, Board of Selectmen first got elected, they challenged this Conservation Commission to pursue sustainable CT certification. And after 3 years, we made it. And we are really passionate about having a community that looks at a lot of different items, including solar. So we are one of 40-some communities of the 169 that are certified now, and we have bronze level certifications. So
That's awesome.
we're, hopefully good team players in all this.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Heather Lombardo, I'm chair of the Agricultural Commission here in town, and just generally speaking, in any of the projects that you've worked on in the Northeast, have any of them had opportunities for the local agricultural community, benefits or negatives and negative impacts to the agricultural community?
Yeah, it's a good question. We try to minimize siting on agricultural land. It's not always possible. There's a lot of solar on agricultural land. We own a lot of solar on agricultural. It's a competing interest for similar types of property. One of the things that we're doing in Simsbury, as we proceed, it's definitely something that's on the table here, is we are owners of the vast majority of the property in Simsbury, and we have agreed to put that property into conservation for agriculture, essentially forever farms, after the project is decommissioned. So that property, which could have easily been developed for residential homes or commercial uses, will be a solar project for a while longer, and then it will be decommissioned, as it's required to do by law, and it will become a farm available for agricultural use forever. And in between now and then, it is sat fallow. It has been planted with legumes and other types of cover crop. And, I would expect it to be one of the best pieces of agricultural land in Connecticut when the solar project's decommissioned, because that soil is recovered from all of the, tobacco farming and pesticides and herbicides that were on that property over the years. In terms of this project, we'll be doing the same thing, restoring the topsoil, right? And ultimately, we would expect some portions of this property to go back to permanent agriculture after we're done, after it's decommissioned. That's our expectation. We'll have conversations about that as we proceed. While the project's operating, there are opportunities for, I forget the word, these.
Apiary?
Yes, apiaries, thank you. So that's one item. Sheep farming, certainly. We won't be able to accommodate between panel row cropping. That is something that's been talked about in the industry, but is not currently economically viable either for the solar farm or for the farmers, unfortunately. So that's our plan. We're happy to meet with any local farmers that are interested in doing anything on the property that would, complement what we're doing.
Okay.
Aaron, you mentioned when we talked that you might have some, the hoop houses, you may be looking for homes for some of
Yes.
the hoop houses.
Yes.
So that's something I think we should follow up with.
We are the proud new owners of a lot of hoop houses. If anybody is interested, please come by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Vicki Dorenzo with the Inland Wetlands Commission. I think we really need to look at maps and stuff first and
That's what
see
I
what
was
the
gonna say,
property
yeah.
is, yeah. So we'll be looking at those things and we'll get back to you guys with any questions.
Yeah, no, perfect. We appreciate that.
I have a few too.
Okay.
I don't have enough for everyone, but.
Do you want to say just 2 or 3 sentences about wetlands real quick?
Sure. I'm a ex-wetland scientist. Still am. But so as Aaron pointed out at the top of the chat here is that we're citing basically where the houses are. So there really, there aren't many wetlands on that site, whether they've been manipulated or, they've changed. There are a couple on site, which we're reviewing. There's generally kind of like the upland review areas and things like that. So we're considering those. We think that, there might be a conversation to have about how it's best to, improve those areas and where we can site, adjacent to them. But I'd say as a whole, we're near a lot of wetlands. I think to Aaron's point, stormwater is the utmost importance to protect the wetlands. And we have other design, like for some of our cabling, we're gonna bore underneath things using directional drills to avoid impacts more on the East Granby side of the project. But yeah, there's different things, a lot of things we can talk about and how we'll minimize and definitely avoid directions.
Great.
So what I think we need to follow up with Abby on this. So I think what I was envisioning in my head anyway is you're one of the few boards who's going to need very technical information before you can provide anything significant in response. Probably the way this happens is you'll get that once their draft application is ready, right? Yeah.
Yes, John, are we done with delineations?
Yeah, delineations are done.
So we could get
So we
the
can
map.
provide you with some preliminary maps and draft wetland reports, if that's helpful.
Maybe
That's all right.
go on next meeting.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Fred Jones, inland wetlands. And I was going to ask the same question that Vicki did, but, because I know I haven't walked the property and I didn't get a chance to get online and look at the inland wetland maps. But I believe there, I don't know if it's a perennial or an intermittent stream that goes through there. And I believe it goes into Salmon Brook,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is a brook that we're very concerned about.
Yeah, no, it's important.
Want to maintain the purity of that federally designated wildlife scene. On the siting commission, do they, what do they have that's inland wetlands
Yeah.
expert?
John, you want to address?
Yeah, I think they may not have a wetland expert, but there's public comment and there'll be times for you guys to engage and they'll ask us those questions and we'll need to respond to the ones that, make sense. And I think the biggest piece, I think, is stormwater. And there's certain setbacks you need. There's general permit we'll be seeking, and that is like, you have to check these boxes, you can get a general permit. So that includes, buffers to wetlands. So I think maybe your aspect is, maybe you guys want to check out our wetland boundaries and just see if you have any questions on that. That's something we can
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And there are tributaries to Salmon Brook. If you look at an area, you'll see every tributary has been ponded. It's been dammed. So, we're working on that all has to do with irrigation. And one thing that's unique about this is there's a lot of water they move around irrigation-wise, and they pump directly from Salmon Brook up to these ponds, they, meaning Monroe, yes. And they circulate it, and it's all circular. It goes back to Salmon Brook. But that's something we won't be doing. So, it's going to be basically our basins will allow water to percolate into the groundwater, and that's kind of how we're going to function with stormwater, is keep it all on site and let it go through the soil.
Are you going to be doing any soil removal? Because it bothers me about the contamination that's in the soil right now. And if so, where are you going to put the soil?
We don't plan to remove any soil. We plan to create it, hopefully create topsoil there. We do expect to move soil around on site. It's pretty flat, but we're going to need to move some subsoil around on site. But ultimately, our goal, and we've been successful at our other projects, to make sure no soil leaves those sites, because you said it correctly, it requires testing, it requires a lot of stuff to deal with to remove it, and there's really no sense in doing that, especially at a site that frankly needs soil. Thank you.
Arella Locke, also on the Wetlands Commission, and they've covered what I have for wetlands. I do, though, you said that the panels ultimately have to be decommissioned,
Yeah.
and what's the time frame?
Yeah, we expect the useful life of the project to be between 25 and on the outside 40 years. Usually it's between 25 and 30. After that time, it'll need to be decommissioned. And there's actually a bonding program set up in the state now that requires a bond be put in place after so many years, and then the project ultimately be decommissioned. There are recycling groups that do recycling of panels. A lot of the material that's on site is very reusable, steel, copper, those sort of things.
Mike Warpo, Board of Finance. First question piggybacks off that. If the effectiveness of the panel is diminishing over time, so you're going to stop using it and decommission, why wouldn't you just replace it and start with a new field, new panels right there?
And there's an opportunity to do that within that 40-year period, right? So if a panel breaks, we would replace it, obviously. But the way I like to think about it is, you buy a new car, and you got a good deal on the car, and you want to run that car until, 200,000 miles, right? And then you're gonna, sell it or whatnot. But you made that initial capital investment early on, so you're gonna want to get all the juice out of it you can. So to build a solar project is very expensive. To operate it and maintain it is much less expensive. So the plan with all of these types of projects is to build it with the best equipment possible, tier 1 panels with warranties, ideally produced in the US, which is something that is becoming big in the industry now and that our company is actually directly invested in, and then run those panels for as long as we can.
I don't think that was Mike's question. Mike's
Yeah.
question
Okay.
was,
So
at the end of 40 years, why not just rebuild the panels?
Oh, it's a permitting requirement that we decommission the project.
Could you re-permit it?
You could re-permit it. I suppose you could re-permit it. Yeah.
Okay, so back to my real question.
But if I could just add, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
No,
just
go
add
ahead.
one more thing. A lot of the time, the concern is, and I'm sorry if I misinterpreted, like, we go bankrupt, for example, in year 10, right? What happens? You guys are stuck with a bunch of stuff in the field. That's really the important part about decommissioning. That's where the bond comes into play, where that gets removed, so you guys aren't stuck with a field of panels. Not necessarily how it would go anyway, but just so you have that peace of mind. So sorry to interrupt you.
So my question is, you've got a project in the works in East Windsor, one existing producing electricity in Simsbury. What's the relative size of each of those to this project, and what's the dollar impact in terms of taxes to each town?
Yeah.
And how's it determined?
So Simsbury is 26.4 megawatts nameplate capacity. Gravel Pit Solar, which is in East Windsor, is 120 megawatts of AC capacity. And broadly, if the proposed project here, we expect to be 100 megawatts, so a little bit smaller than East Windsor, quite a bit larger than Simsbury. The panel technology has gotten better between those projects, over the years. So the individual panel, a little bigger than the sheet of plywood, produces more watts now than it did then. So the size impact's a little bit different. In terms of your taxes, we can have an in-depth conversation about that. This will be a roughly, $80 million project. That's before some incentives, so we can have an in-depth conversation about that. But it will more than double the tax revenue off of the property currently.
Remind us what percentage is in each town, please.
60/40 roughly, 60 and
That was my question. So I'll ask the other one that's unrelated to finance. You keep talking about sheep. Is there something wrong with goats and cows?
Yes.
Because we have cows eating under our panels up in Vermont.
Yes.
We're told that's risky, but there's never been a problem.
So I don't personally have a problem with goats or cows. I don't discriminate when it comes to farm animals, but the insurance companies do. And
Really?
goats are notorious for eating everything. Cows, there's a lot of different cows, different varieties, but cows as well. So We're told we can have sheep, the shorter the better, but not goats and cows.
Okay.
I would like to jump on top of things.
Yeah,
No, you're interested, I just think our ag community, we have a lot of people interested in cows and grazing land for cows, and I.
you know what just came to me, we've never talked about this, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for mentioning it, but chickens. Nobody's ever talked about chickens. I mean, they go on stuff too, but they're smaller.
Hawks will eat them, hawks will eat.
Fox. Hawks will eat the chickens.
Fox, yeah.
The bears eat them.
Bears.
We got bears.
We're not going down the bear path.
We will have a fence.
Good luck. That's not good. Not gonna stop the boobs.
My question is, excuse me, Bill Kennedy, Board of Finance. Who has control of the bond?
Yeah, the state does. I don't know what state agency it is.
That's it.
We can have a larger conversation about that, certainly, if you'd like.
Fred Moffett, Board of Selectmen. One question I'd heard from a person, let's say, was in my practice, they were worried about like raptors losing areas to hunt and stuff in all the solar fields that are in Massachusetts. So, I mean, I know you're going to do a survey with the animals and stuff, so
Yeah.
it's,
It's a fair question. I don't have a great answer for it, other than to say, it's hoop houses now,
right,
and there's not a lot of habitat around them currently.
right.
I'm not gonna say we're an improvement, it'll be different. Yeah.
That's all. But I look forward to other information.
If I can follow up, is there a particular species of raptor? Because one thing I see in Connecticut, and we're working with Tom Sayers, he's kind of a kestrel master of putting in kestrel nest boxes, so little falcons.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's a big advocate for solar action increasing. So I'm just curious, is there any particular raptor? Or?
It was interesting because she lives in Simsbury and she seems very green forward, let's say. And I had said, oh, we're looking at this solar project. And she said, oh, well, you know, the ones in Massachusetts have taken some of the habitat from peregrine falcons, you know, the middle-sized type of raptor. That was it. It's just fill time in my exam room when I'm trying to write stuff in my chart. That's all.
We do have kestrel boxes over in East Windsor though.
Oh, cool.
Do that here.
Peggy Chapel, Board of Selectmen. You mentioned noise. How much noise do you expect to be generated from this project, and how do you control the noise?
Yeah, so the piece of equipment that would make noise here are called inverters. They're about the size of a full-size pickup truck, roughly. And they will make a low humming noise during the day when the project is generating power. We're required to do a very in-depth noise study, sound study, and we'll actually locate the inverters within the project area to make sure that they don't exceed a certain sound threshold. So basically, abutters won't be able to hear them because we're required to make sure that they don't hear them. Now, this has been an issue in East Windsor that I think has made the news a little bit. It's maybe worth talking about. There's a small, what we call distributed generation project there that was built, or I should say permitted, and then a residential subdivision was permitted on the lot next to it. And then they built a solar project. The developer, as I understand it, didn't necessarily inform folks that there was a solar project coming in. And the siting council, again, as I understand it, didn't have them study the sensitive receptors, those new homes that would be there. So that resulted in an inverter being very close to some people's homes. And the way we avoid that is assuming that all the developable space around the project could have sensitive receptors and siting the inverters appropriately within the middle of the project, not on the edges of the project. There'll be a more in-depth summary of decibels and ambient noise conditions in our report, but I can direct you to the current report we did for Gravel Pit Solar in East Windsor. It has a summary of some of that stuff, if that's helpful. It's in the Siting Council document.
Okay. Will there be any impact on the bike trails that run through the property?
It's interesting you mention that.
I was going to work on that trail question. Answer her.
So we actually met with that group today to start conversations about how we can minimize impacts. We have no plans to do anything physically to the bike path. It does, if you are familiar with it, it goes across sort of the edge of the property north of Floydville and then goes north, and there's that old church, and then it goes into East Granby. Currently, the trucks for Monrovia go, over that. During construction, we'll need to do the same thing. So we'll have to coordinate with flaggers and make sure that there's no impact or minimal impacts to cyclists. But then long term, we don't have a lot of activity there. So I think you may actually see an improvement in terms of just, the amount of trucks going through there. Once our project's operational, we may have a pickup truck a day. Unless something breaks, we may have a few more. So they're a group that we're interested in working with. I'm a cyclist. I know other folks on our team are cyclists. I've ridden that trail. We want to make sure that we don't have impacts. We're actually talking about ways we might be able to do like a kiosk or a restroom or some other additional amenities for the trail in the area.
Thank you.
So I'll follow on to the bike trail. I think the state has a right-of-way through the center of both of the north and south of Floydville there on the East Granby side. But right now, they loop it around the perimeter that happens to come into Granby. I was just wondering, is that going to be maintained? You're going to change the path?
We don't expect to change the path at all, no. We were walking out there today. It's nice. You have recommendations to make it better. We're happy to hear them, but no, we understand it's on the DOT property. John gets the pleasure of working with the DOT. So yeah, that's about it. We'll have some underground crossings and then just the truck traffic during construction.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
So with your...
This is our new town manager.
Mike Walsh, town manager.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Pleasure to meet you too. On the East Windsor project, that was slightly bigger, so we're about 83% of their capacity at 100, they're at 120. You made a $1.5 million payment to them. Do the math, it'd be $1,250,000. 60% of that, 750, and it was equally split between beginning of construction, beginning of installation, completion of construction, at certificate of occupancy, and at the commercial operation. Would that be similar to what you're contemplating here?
So yeah, that's a voluntary economic development package that we entered into with East Windsor, associated with a tax stabilization agreement. So taking our tax payments and flatlining them for the life of the project. And in later years, they do escalate, but instead of getting the typical massive depreciation drop you get, we levelize those out. We would love to do something similar here with you all. We could see something like that in magnitude happening here. There's also other things we've been talking to some folks in the town about, and we understand might be interesting for the town in terms of setting aside some properties as part of that conversation for other types of development.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to get a better deal than East Windsor.
You are already telling me that, Mark.
We're nice.
Just wanted to make sure that
You're nice.
The only question I had is, have you guys had any experience with decommissioning any sites yet?
No, it's a good question. We're one of the few solar companies that have done some of that. Most of the projects are too new, as you can imagine. We have some projects in the Midwest that were damaged by hail. So it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it's not far off. And we also had a project mid-construction damaged by I guess it was a tropical storm at the time it hit us. So we're experienced with dealing with removal, whereas most companies are just experienced dealing with installation. Yeah. We were able to actually recycle and then reuse or resell some of their equipment. That was good.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Eric Myers, Planning and Zoning. You touched on something that's the basis of my question. There are a couple of pieces of property on here that I believe are probably Monrovia property that don't look like they have solar on them. Do you intend to offer those back up for some sort of viable commercial use? Including the corner lot where the Monrovia office building currently sits today does not look like it's occupied. I'm confused by the yellow box on the other side of the street. But I can't tell if that's solar or if that's going to be available for use, or any other property that's on there will be made available. This is one of the last prime pieces of commercial available real estate in the town of Granby that is no longer available to us. So any scraps that can be made available would be appreciated.
So we'd like to do a little bit better than give you guys scraps. And that corner, as I understand, and having been in your town but a few times, is a very central location.
Highly visible as well.
It's also very visible. So one of the things that we are proposing and would like to continue conversations about is how we can get the town some different uses on those properties. So we're not intending to build on those properties, especially that northern square around the office. That southern square, we'd also like to set aside for town use. Town use, I should say. Other types of use, town interest.
So, okay.
Well, mixed use, whatever it's zoned for.
So we have some things to talk about.
Yes, definitely.
Steve Muller, Planning and Zoning. How does it connect to the grid, and where is that going to go?
Yeah, so it connects to the grid in East Granby. It connects to the existing 345 kV lines, which are here on this map.
Okay.
I don't have it shown because some of that's still in negotiations, but that is an underground connection that will go to a new substation on a property in East Granby.
So what kind of impact is that going to have along the way? You have to build that as you go.
Yeah, it's going to be entirely underground.
Okay.
So from the property under the brook will be what's called horizontal directional drill. Yeah, we're going to bore it.
Okay.
And then we're going to come up on the other side, and then it'll be bored or trenched back to the point of interconnection. So no new overhead lines.
And the whole system will go through that one area?
The whole system will go through that one area. Yeah, it'll be probably, off the top of my head, 4 circuits, 34.5 kV underground going to a 34.5 to 345. John? It's about a mile.
Yeah, it's about a mile.
About a mile. Yeah.
Okay, Meg Bailey, Planning and Zoning. So Eric brought up the other uses of the land that you would own but not have the panels on. What do you see complementing the solar farm? What do people usually put adjacent to it?
Yeah, I mean, it could be
Is there a precedent for that?
It could be used for a number of different things. Yeah. I envision that just, off the top of my head, mixed use development, retail, like commercial, office space, maybe some residential. It's really up to you. And, we're setting it aside, we're likely to set it aside for, whatever uses the town feels like it's best for.
And what do you think about then the noise and the visual impact for whatever goes right there?
So the noise, we will be designing the project to make sure there's no noise impact on whatever goes there. We're going to assume it's a sensitive receptor. The visual impact is subjective, right? Currently it is a bunch of hoop houses with tarps on them. It will be solar panels. It will look different. There will be screening. We will be putting in, we probably can't see that very well now, but we'll be putting in landscaping. There is a fence, but it's not a privacy fence. It's like an agricultural type fence, so it's not visually intrusive. We've seen these fit into communities pretty harmoniously. My dad used to live near one in Colorado that was like, just down the road. They walked around it. It was just sort of part of the community. So I think visually It should be, it'll be different. It'll be different.
Thank you.
My name's Eric Lukenville. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think one of the things that our commission has learned over the years is that one of the ways you can really reduce the visual impact of any kind of development is by the appropriate planting of trees and landscaping. I'm particularly interested in hearing about and then maybe working with all of you on the selection of trees, whether they're going to be bare root, bald and burlap, whether they're going to be in containers, and also whether you're thinking about conifers or deciduous trees. Just in general, I'm quite interested in trees and
Yeah.
We would love to work with you closely on that kind of thing.
This is just the kind of input we're looking for, because I've been to communities that are like, yeah, we want a wall of arborvitaes. We want a wall of green giant arborvitaes as far as you can see. And I don't think that's a good solution, but I want to hear from you. We have done in other places a mix of different types of native plants, native trees and shrubs, hardwoods, conifers, what have you. And so looking forward to getting your input.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to hear it.
Paula Johnson, Planning and Zoning. I think everybody's taken my thunder. We've spoken about the decommissioning. I'm very happy about that. That's one thing Planning and Zoning has always asked. How are you going to, for a backyard solar panel, when you're finished, you have to take them down. It's part of our regulations. We've talked about sound, and the sound sounds like a well-planned visual impact with Eric's trees, and work with Eric. I think that will be glare is one thing that has come up in the past, and I don't know anything about it and how it impacts the neighborhoods.
One of the first solar projects I did, I got lucky and got to build a solar project on an airport, federally obligated mid-sized regional airport, and I got a master's level course in glare analysis, which was not entirely pleasant, but we did end up building the project actually on the airport in southern Maine, right next to the runways in some areas. And what we found, and what the industry's found over time, is doing a glare analysis early is helpful and can give you feedback, especially proximity to Bradley, and then obviously the Simsbury Airport right there. If there is a glare issue, which is actually fairly uncommon, a slight adjustment of the azimuth of the panel, so instead of being perfectly north-south, tweaking them one way or the other can avoid some of that issue. But we will be doing those analyses as we proceed. They're not done yet. It's a very good question.
That's fine.
Bob Lavin, Planning and Zoning. How dependent is the financial viability of this project on federal support, and would a change in Congress and the presidency potentially kill it?
That's a good question. So the industry has gone through a few cycles of different, political control in the White House. The industry is also seen what we call the tax credit, investment tax credit, come and go. So these are financial instruments that the U.S. government uses to support or encourage solar. And the industry and our projects in particular have lived through all of those changes. So one of the reasons why we build larger projects is because they're more financially viable. There's economies of scale associated with these larger projects. So if there were a change in the federal government tomorrow that took away the only, and this is literally the only incentive that we get, the investment tax credit, we would still go ahead with the project. It'd be slightly more expensive, it would be potentially less lucrative, but we would still proceed with the project.
You mentioned in your literature online, I followed the website, the solar panels are described as not having any toxic materials or anything. Was that different earlier on in the industry? Because I had remember hearing that they had lead, cadmium, and other nasty stuff.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of information about that, but what I do know is the majority of the materials in the panels is silicone material. There's glass, there's copper, there's some other sort of rare earth mineral materials in there, but they don't leach out. Like whatever's in the panel stays in the panel. But we can get you more information about it. I don't have all those details.
Okay, and last question. You mentioned the fence. Have you ever had any problems with kids getting in and getting barbecued, basically? I shouldn't use the word barbecue.
No, yeah. We do have problems with kids occasionally throwing rocks. We've never had problems with kids getting in the fence. The panels themselves are pretty low voltage. So even if you went up and, cut the wire behind a panel and stuck it to your forehead, you're going to be okay. The inverters are the piece of the equipment that's more concerning. And you got to want to get into that to, cause yourself some harm. So we haven't had that issue yet. We have had kids throw rocks. We've had dirt bikes and ATVs in construction, mess up some of our civil construction, but we haven't had that issue.
As someone whose kids would be the ones to barbecue themselves. Most of my thunder was stolen too, especially the economic development carve out. I think that's very interesting because we have such limited property on the utilities there. So eager to hear more about that.
Yep, appreciate it.
Jim Caldwell, Development Commission. Is Eversource, are they the only buyer? Can anyone else buy from or the panels developed?
It's a very good question. So currently Eversource is a potential buyer. They're not the buyer. They're the interconnected utility. That's who we plug into. So other utilities or large commercial users could buy the energy from the project. So our project in East Windsor serves Comcast. I think almost all of Comcast's facilities in Connecticut run off of that project. And it serves a number of municipal light departments.
Outside of Connecticut?
Outside of Connecticut, some in Rhode Island, yeah. We are actively trying to sell Connecticut Power. We would like them to buy it. And we have had contracts with them before, but they have been in some cases unworkable. But we are trying again. We're working through an RFP.
Marty Schwager, Chair of the Development Commission. Unfortunately, a lot of my questions have been answered. But I do a couple. One being, will the underlying zoning stay the same, the designations, or does that change?
To my knowledge, it will. We're not seeking any zoning changes. So simply the siting council supersedes, approves. Yeah.
Okay. But possibly in the future, the carve-out properties, obviously, they would potentially be going through zoning changes for whatever use they may propose for the front section.
It's possible.
Okay. So we alluded to a lot of money that you're going to pay us there in town. What do you want from the town of Granby with respect to any expenses that you see on our side of the ledger? We're not going to part of town services.
Yeah, it's a fair question. So we don't need water. We don't need sewer. There's some of that there already for the office building. We don't have little solar panels going to school. We will give the fire department some training, some information about the project, how they can get into the project, but typically there's not a lot of issues with fire at these facilities. And then police services are also pretty limited unless somebody's kids throwing rocks, and then that's an issue. So the services required from the town are a lot less than almost any other type of development. So this is a very high net benefit to the town in terms of tax income because there's not a drain on resources that comes with other types of development.
Hi, Anna Saluzzo, Development Commission. Most of my questions have been answered as well. Just wondering, how do you actually go about maintaining it? Is there someone that visits it every day? Do you electronically monitor it? How does that work?
Yeah, both of those things. Not necessarily every day, but everything is electronically monitored. There's a direct hardwired connection to the facility through usually fiber or some other internet. So it's not just Wi-Fi, and it's monitored that way. And then folks come if there's an issue, and they come to inspect regularly. And then there's the landscaping maintenance that's required with the mowing. Folks visit for that as well.
I get a question that was raised in this last part. Right now, there is a taxable entity on that property. Do solar panels change in the sense of how the property is taxed, or is it can it be taxed at all in the tie with the state?
Yes, it can be taxed, and the primary change is, and I'm not a tax expert, so we are adding personal property to the property. It's got an increased assessment value.
So it would be worth a lot more than.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's no tax abatement through the state?
No, we're not seeking it. There's no tax abatement with the state. We're not seeking a tax abatement. We are in conversations about the tax stabilization, which essentially just changes how we pay you taxes over time.
Can that conversation include our source of energy? Source of energy for town and school functions?
This is a question I get a lot. The way our project is designed, we can't effectively sell you energy. It's like a massive fire hose and you're like a drinking fountain. We can talk about ways that we can incentivize solar, other solar projects, community solar projects in the community. But because of the mismatch in voltage, frankly, it just doesn't work to sell you all energy. But we can have that conversation in a different way.
Okay.
Board members, any other questions?
One quick follow-up, not ag related, but just the year of construction, the period of construction, how does that sort of impact the center of town or the flow of equipment coming in and out of the property? Do you have like sort of a map of your entry points for how that is going to work?
That's one of the things we also want feedback on, how best to move traffic through town. It will be a increase in the answer can't be sent to these. That's their answer for you all. Yeah, so that's one of the things we got to work out. There'll be an increase in traffic during construction for sure, but we need to figure out how to direct that effectively.
We've had some preliminary conversations already with the chief about part of your package will include a transportation plan around the construction. I loved your honest answer, which is we will have a transportation plan. We will do the best to enforce it, but they're truckers. They're going to go where they want to go. So, yeah. Construction part of the project is probably the toughest part for us.
Just add to that, we've spent a lot of time trying to develop those plans for the gravel pit solar project. And, you know, don't hold me to this, but we had one truck go the wrong way. And so there was a lot of trucks, and I think we spent a lot of time focused on getting them maps. Like, you miss your stop, your next stop is here. You miss that, you gotta go all the way around again. So we really spent a lot of time with that delivery service, bring panels or what have you, to go the way we want. But we do our best.
So I'm talking out loud. I'm going to try to throw out an idea of how to proceed from here. Maybe the boards could take the next 30 days, So you get to the end of April. End of April. That would be your deadline to get us any questions, any more information you think you need to do your second assignment, which is in the next 30 days before June 1, is to pretend your board was the only board who was going to negotiate the deal. What do you want on the table? Those who get, so end of April, any questions or more information you need. End of May, anything you want us to consider as we're working through. We've talked about a lot of different things. We need to get all those in one place.
Excuse me, Mark, are you talking the whole negotiation or a specific part of the negotiation based on the board or commission that's reviewing it?
Want you to pretend your board is negotiating this deal and give us everything, you give the Board of Selectmen everything you want considered.
Yes. The entire deal, from financing to...
If you don't want to do the financing, you don't have to. You can focus on the things that matter most to you.
You're talking about negotiating a deal between the town and Broadway.
Yes.
Right. Nothing to do with the siting council. So we're talking about the deal we get as.
Yeah, you can see how nervous Aaron is when I call it a deal. There's
the partnership.
There's a lot of work back and forth to get to where they're comfortable and we're comfortable.
Yeah.
We want to try to do as much of that without, before we get to the signing council, right? So each of you, you can just tell by your questions, you have slightly different expertise, slightly different interests, and so what you got to get to the Board of Selectmen is what of those things do you want to make sure we ask them to do or not to do as we work through this process. He's going to say no to some of them, and he's going to say yes to others. The Board of Selectmen is going to try to operate as the clearinghouse for those. So we're speaking with one voice. Are you good with that?
Yeah, sounds good. I just want to say I appreciate the time. I know it's late. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Look forward to working with you all. If you need a hoop house, we do have a website, broadleafsolar.com. Check it out.
Aaron, and maybe Abby already knows, but are we trying to get a date set for the public session, public open house?
Yes. We don't have a date in mind yet that I'm aware of unless there's a talk. So likely later in April, sometime early May at the latest. We want to make sure we do it before vacations and all that. But the intent is to maybe even do it here or somewhere like this. We would bring our experts in, and it may actually make sense to do this after we have some of the questions from the boards. We bring all of our experts in. We got one guy we pay a lot of money to do the sound, another person that does the visual, and a woman who does the cultural resources stuff. So they all come in, and folks can come and ask them questions. And we can even do an early session just for the boards potentially. We'll figure out how to do that best, but this is the first of many opportunities to get feedback or give feedback and ask questions.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned.
Thank you.